A few things real quick. One, there are going to be spoilers. You've been warned. Two, for those of you who've been waiting for this, I'm sorry it took so long. It just kind of became way more than I expected it to be. So I recently finished Kingdom Hearts 3, and all I have to say is I'm confused. I love the franchise. I played or watched everything on the PS4 release of Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue. I played the original Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, as well as 1.5 and 2.5 HD remixes, which include Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 Final Mix. Am I the greatest Kingdom Hearts fan, whatever that means? No. Have I taken in every single piece of lore ever seen and tried to compile it into something? Well, I am a lore hound, but I haven't really taken the time to sit down and piece it together. That being said, I'm not trying to do that here. I'm just throwing in my 2 cents worth on something and maybe offer a perspective that incorporates my wide, if somewhat shallow, knowledge base. Kingdom Hearts 3 was received with, shall we say, mixed feelings. A number of people I know were really upset or angry with the final product, and honestly, I understand. There are quite a few things about the release that disappoint me. Am I angry? Right now, not really. Honestly, I'm just disappointed and confused a little bit. So let's get into this and see why. We start off heading toward Olympus Coliseum, or at least that's what I thought, until in typical Sora fashion, he gets lost and is dumped halfway up the mountain. This makes sense. We saw a little bit of the world in Birth by Sleep, so we should be able to explore it a bit more. And it would give us a good tutorial level, and having the arena opened up early could allow for all kinds of leveling and reward tracks. Makes sense, Birth by Sleep did this. Initially, I was having fun. The fighting was fairly clean and standard. You start with a new spell, which also is an entirely new element, and the fighting was smooth. Mashing X let you do combos, and it felt pretty okay. Things were going well. Then this happened. I was shocked, but I also thought, this is so cool! It really shows how much Sora has grown since the beginning of the first game. I thought the reaction commands in the second game were awesome, but I wish that I could actually do the things they were showing, rather than just pressing triangle. I was happy they had this. It had so much potential, and we could do so many things with it. As the game kept going, there were more cool moments. Sora free-falling in a burning city, more wall running, flow motion that doesn't feel absolutely necessary, and even when you do use it, it doesn't feel like you're trying to control a ballistic missile. And even Donald and Goofy doing team attacks was fun, and I appreciated how they added the form change to let you use older attacks like Sonic Blade and Ars Arcanum. Despite the good feelings, there was a strange, nagging thought at the back of my head. Something wasn't quite right, but I couldn't place my finger on it. Then, during the first boss, a new situation command appeared. It did introduce this thing called an interaction command, but it didn't really show us what it was, just how to do it. Seeing the triangle indicator, I pressed the button. Then, this happened. What is this? What's going on? How do I control this? Why am I on a glowing Christmas light pirate ship? Why is it firing water cannons? Why does it do so much damage and knockback? Oh, good grief, the fight barely started and the boss has already lost almost half of its hit points? This is when it finally hit me. That nagging feeling that's been in the back of my mind? I now know how to articulate it, and the phrase terrifies me. This doesn't feel like a Kingdom Hearts game. Having moved to a new generation of console, the graphical fidelity of the game increased. Among other things, this allows them to change two major things. First of all, the menu. This is a minor gripe of mine, but the menu just isn't as clear, and to be honest, I'm not a fan of the portrait style rather than the walking style of previous games. The second, and arguably larger thing, is the change in the maps. In the past, each world was comprised of a number of smaller maps that were connected through loading screens. Now, through the new console's capabilities, the developers are able to reduce the number of maps down by a large amount. I counted 3 maps in the first world total. Combine this with vertical movement and wall running, and this allows for a lot of exploring. Or it would if you could run up any wall, which you can't. I understand why, of course. If you had perfect movement, you would run into what I call the Warframe problem. Anyone who has played Warframe knows that for most enemies, players just sprint, run, jump, and fly past them, which in an RPG means you lose experience, levels, progression, etc. It also means that you lose out on challenges the developers posed. However, at certain points, it creates plot frustration, like when Sora is in a maze and doesn't just run up the walls to get to his allies easier. Except at the end, when he runs up to the final fight. Why didn't you do that in the first place? The other thing that this vertical map and lack of smaller maps does is make the mini-map unclear. In the old games, you could see clear boundaries with clearly defined exits. Without those, it's really hard to know where you can go. I found this to be the worst on the Toy Story level, where you have a towering level with multiple stores you need to get to on multiple levels. Without a clearly defined, here's where the next zone starts, I could never figure out where I could go, let alone where I was supposed to go. Part of this led to my earlier comment of how it doesn't feel like a Kingdom Hearts game. My initial impression was that Kingdom Hearts 3 was trying to be God of War. Sure, part of that was the fact that it took place in the ancient Greece level, but the level design of the initial world didn't have that Kingdom Hearts feel. Now, for the actual game mechanics. The Kingdom Hearts 3 system is a valiant attempt to combine the command style and command deck system of Birth by Sleep with the system they had in Kingdom Hearts 2. For the most part, it worked. However, there are a few issues with it. Situation commands are 1. You have no control over when you have the option to activate team attacks other than when Donald and Goofy say, hey, you have 30 seconds to do this thing. Command style changes are based on what keyblade you're wielding, and casting multiple of the same type of spell gives you the opportunity to use a heightened version of that spell. While I think the keyblade foreign chases are cool, and I love that the developers, who were probably bored with doing sword-based animations, branched out to do flexible weapons, guns, spears, etc. However, it feels like they ran out of ideas and threw this in because it was easier to come up with animations for new weapons than it was to come up for new animations for the Keyblade. In Kingdom Hearts 2, Terra's Keyblade changes during the Terra's Armor secret boss fight, so there is some precedent for this sort of thing, but honestly, I wish they gave us a little bit more of an explanation. If they had some comment about there being history, I wouldn't feel quite as awkward about it. And then there are the attraction commands. I'm going to be honest, I hate these things. They are too strong, they do too much damage, you are immune to damage while you're using some of them, and they often provide some form of crowd control. So even if you could take damage, the enemy is too busy flying through the air, unable to do anything. Now, fortunately, these aren't required, with the possible exception of certain bosses. But more importantly, there is no way to turn these things off! This is a huge oversight. I'm sorry, I can shut off flow motion. I can opt to not give myself upgrades. I can even give up getting experience. But I can't remove clutter from my situation commands? Are you serious? What's worse is that there's no plot explanation for the attraction commands. In the past, Drive Forms had a very specific explanation. Sora's clothing was magic, being gifted to him by the fairies from Sleeping Beauty. Magic was given to him by Donald, skills by Goofy. Sure, reaction commands had no explanation, but as easily chalked up to Sora just getting better, being more skilled, etc. Why are there magical glowing teacups? It's just, ugh! Anyway, I spent enough time talking about this. Let's get to the real reason people play these games. Yes, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to this game. It doesn't mean that the story was complete, though. The game suffers from what I like to call Metal Gear syndrome. There are so many cutscenes, especially at the end. Cutscene after cutscene after cutscene. And then you walk a little ways and there's another cutscene. And this doesn't just happen at the end. In between levels, we get dumped with cutscenes with what's going on with the other characters. And yet despite this, there's very little development of the plot. Sora hops from world to world trying to find the power of waking. The whole point in Dream Drop Distance that was somewhat lost. The power of waking was never really explained, and I assumed it was so Sora could wake up Ventus. However, later we get a one-sentence explanation of the power of waking from the main villain. He says, it's for traversing hearts to reach worlds, not for traversing worlds to reach hearts. What? First of all, why do we believe this guy? The vast majority of his plans hinge on him deceiving characters, telling half-truths to mislead. Secondly, what does that even mean? Anyway, Sora doesn't have the power of waking and needs to go find it. Somehow, as told by Yen Sid, the ancient Keyblade Master who has been the knowing wise man who guides the characters. Basically, Sora gets benched from the action because this wise guy made a test to teach him the power of waking, but it got hijacked by Xehanort, and Sora almost gets turned into Xehanort's super magic puppet. So now Sora has to learn the power of waking with no guidance before he can do anything to help that doesn't involve the power of waking. Hey, Yen-Sid, you remember who Sora is, right? The guy who beat Ansem and Xemnas? The guy who's gone toe-to-toe with Xehanort multiple times and only lost because he was in literally a multiple level of Inception-style dreaming? The guy who has been to the end of the worlds, the world that never was, and the far shore in the realm of darkness? He fought countless heartless nobodies, at least one god, possibly twice, Titans, a dragon, and has the greatest power of connection you have ever seen. But no, Sora gets sidelined to being that protagonist that has to find the power after losing it. Spoiler, it was with him the whole time. I wish I was kidding, but no, they pull that trope on us. So you hop from world to world, including Hercules, Tangled, Frozen, Toy Story, Monsters Incorporated, Winnie the Pooh, Pirates 3, Big Hero 6, Twilight Town, and finish up with the Keyblade Graveyard, making pit stops at the Realm of Darkness, the Land of Departure, and the Final World, a new world. Do you notice a problem with this list? Because I noticed two. First of all, for a main installment of the franchise, there's an awfully small number of worlds. Consider that the first game had 14 unique worlds, with you visiting at least 2 worlds twice. Kingdom Hearts 2 had 15 worlds, most of which you visited twice. Kingdom Hearts 3 has 10, and that's being generous. On top of that, the levels just felt wrong. They're designed like a one-way path rather than a zone to be explored. Additionally, the only Kingdom Hearts original worlds that with actual level that is more than just a single boss fight are Twilight Town and the Keyblade Graveyard. And even those are so much less than they could be. The Keyblade Graveyard is just a series of boss fights with corridors that offer no challenge or real gameplay to speak of. Twilight Town has a few zones, but we're never given the opportunity to really explore anywhere plot relevant, like the mansion or the train station. I don't care if there aren't enemies to fight there, just let us visit and explore these places. There's another glaring problem that's part of the previous point. We don't go to Radiant Garden! And yet, many plot-important things happen there. Organization members wake up as people. Roxas is given a body off camera. Riku and Mickey go there in order to track Terra. Zexion, or as he's now known, Ienzo, acts as a somewhat significant support role from there. Why aren't we allowed to explore one of the most iconic levels of many games? Why isn't Xehanort trying to lock Radiant Garden down? Surely he's smart enough to know that information control is crucial to preventing his opponents from having any chance of winning. Sure, the guy's playing excellent 4D chess and is very self-confident, but he isn't so arrogant to not try to prevent the heroes from having access to all of Ansem's old equipment. Ansem, you know, the guy who has been one of the most consistent people causing him problems, all indirectly through Sora, Riku, and the gang? In the same vein as a number of events happening away from Sora, we get introduced to members of the new Organization 13, who are all villains we have fought before, in some capacity. Xehanort's Heartless, Xemnas, Xigbar, Luxord, Marluxia, Larxene, Young Possessed Riku, Young Xehanort, and Vanitas all show up and make veiled hints about things not going our way while saying, "Good job, guys, keep doing what you're doing." They also make a point to say that the original 7 Princesses of Heart from Kingdom Hearts 1 fulfilled their duty and thus passed the power on to other princesses. So we get to see Rapunzel, Elsa, Anna, and confirm that they have said duty power thing. Larxene makes some comments about how the organization needs them as a backup plan, and that is it. We never hear about this again. Ever. Okay, moving on. No, hold on, I can't. Why aren't we doing more with this? Surely something could be done with this. Have Kairi or Axel go looking for the princesses, and have Sora help them out. Have the villains make a more concerted effort to shape the events of the world so that the princesses are secure. They're so passive, and yet the worlds have no major impact on the story as to be even more pointless than any game yet. I could see the people making the argument that individual worlds in the past games have mini-episodic-like plots that don't really contribute to the story, but not wanting to make this essay of a review any longer than it has to, I'm going to say you're wrong, and we'll deal with that problem another day. Right, now moving on. After flailing about trying to get the power of waking and not being able to find it, Sora gets a message that Riku and Mickey have been lost in the Realm of Darkness. Sora, being Sora and having a negative wisdom and intelligence bonus, used his heart as his guiding key to find his way to his island, which has a door to the Realm of Darkness in it, somehow, and goes in. He fights possessed Aqua, and somehow drags Riku, Aqua, and Mickey out. It's worth mentioning that the entirety of the Realm of Darkness is just this boss fight. And another boss fight earlier where you play as Riku. No searching, no following a trail, nothing. Just Aqua and Heartless Swarm earlier. Okay, moving on. So now we have Aqua, but Sora still doesn't have the power of waking. Does he now go back to what he was going to do? Nope! Let's go straight to Ventus, even though we know the bad guys are looking for him and are unsure if he is woken up. You know, since Sora is meant to have the power of waking for this very reason, right? That was the whole point of Dream Drop Distance as a game? No? Alright, I guess we're gonna do this then. Anyway, Vanitas shows up by following our heroes. Surprise! He tries to kill Aqua and Ventus, and would succeed, except Sora exists as a character. Using his superpower of being everybody's friend, as well as his proximity to Ventus, lets Ventus's heart return to him, and thus it becomes 5 versus 1 fight against Vanitas, who, unlike everyone else in the game, is not a complete moron, and teleports away. From here, we get the prepared to go to the final battle cutscene. And before I get into this, I want to push the significance of how everything up until this point has been entirely a waste of time. That power of waking was with you the whole time trope has rendered all of the work up until this point, well, pointless. The whole point of the journey was the journey doesn't really help here because there was only 1 or 2 moments where Sora really, quote, learns anything, and even those are things he just needs a reminder of and are just like it just doesn't work. Or they just confirm his feelings. Like, why? Why are we doing it like this? There's like no growth. At least in 1, he was like searching for his friends. In 2, he was trying to figure out what was going on. What are these organization members doing? This, it's just nothing. Anyway, we have a number of short cutscenes of people preparing for the final battle, who they talk to, what's going on, and then everybody pops over to the Keyblade graveyard. After a boss, or bosses, I honestly can't remember because there were so many bosses and nothing else in the Keyblade graveyard, Sora dies. Well, he kinda dies. He ends up in the final world. Turns out he has been in this thing called the final world before. I can't say when, because it certainly wasn't Dive into the Heart. And the only other time we've seen anything like this is during the tutorial, which never gets any kind of explanation. Let's assume it has something to do with his turning into a Heartless in the first game and the events of Castle Oblivion, just to be charitable. After reassembling himself, he then goes and fights a Heartless that was trapping the hearts of his friends. All of his friends in one Heartless. That's cool. Glad we knew about this world mechanic before going into this. You know, the one where Heartless can have multiple hearts in them. Very cool indeed. Anyway, the only person he doesn't need to save, and indeed someone who saves him, is Kairi. A nice subversion of expectations. Or it would be, except that it doesn't come across as such. It's more of a, oh hey, Kairi is Sora's light. You know, being a princess of heart and a guardian of light, that makes sense, and is kind of cool, since you know they're in love. It's almost like that's how relationships work, and Sora's superpower is relationships and friendships. It occurs to me that I missed a very important character moment before this, but I will talk about that when I get to characters. But remember that point. Sora's superpower is relationships. Mostly friendships, but let's be honest, Kairi and Sora are being shipped by the devs super hard. Back to the story, you replay the cutscene before Sora dies. However, this time it's different, since the implication is that there's some kind of time jump, that Sora is revisiting past events. Sora knows what's coming and will be able to stop him, right? Nope. Terra's armor shows up with Terra's mind and stops Terra's body from killing everybody. The Heartless Swarm shows up and a boss fight ensues. We will never see this armor again. That's okay. It's fine. Wasn't an important secret boss in Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix or a major point at the end of Birth by Sleep. Also, no real reason for it to show up now as opposed to earlier when the exact same events happened. Cool, thanks guys. The Heartless boss turns into a super Heartless tornado. And Sora, being the brave kid he is, now that he has his friends, charges forward to stop it. Then he sees a mysterious young man who says, "Need a hand?" We have never seen this guy before. And Sora suddenly has all the help from past Keyblade wielders and blows the Heartless tornado up. Ventus says it was the light from the past. Heartless swarm again because of some Xehanort or another, and yet Sid shows up, making a path for you. making this the single most useful thing he does for the entire game. Anyway, the heroes fight the bad guys, which means they collectively fall into Xehanort's hands. Roxas comes to the rescue. Xion switch sides to help out, which really should screw up the evil guy's math somewhere, but apparently that doesn't matter. Kairi gets kidnapped and straight up murdered by Xehanort, even though you defeat every single version of him, and he still gets the Kai blade off of Kairi's death. Okay. This is fine. No, this is okay. Seriously, I'm not aggravated by this at all. Look, I know this was the right move to make from a story perspective. However, I'm a little annoyed at how it was done, and that the devs think Sora needed some kind of incentive to stop Xehanort. And even though Sora has been friendly toward all the organization members, you would think that his love interest's death would make him have some kind of rage against Xehanort, right? Hint, it doesn't really. After some plot exposition, Sora uses Xehanort as a portal to transcend time and space, to stop him from taking Kingdom Hearts. Okay. After a cool boss fight in a cool world that we don't spend nearly enough time exploring or having fun in, Xehanort concedes defeat after Eraqus reappears as he somehow Obi-Wan ghosted himself into Terra and was hitching a ride for all these 10 plus years. They chat. Xehanort was trying to cleanse the worlds of evil by plunging them all into darkness and having Kingdom Hearts create a new perfect world of light. Xehanort then gives up and just kind of dies arm in arm with Eraqus. Kairi is still dead. Sora just lets him go, no mentioning her at all. This is fine. Everyone returns, and in typical Sora fashion, Sora says, "I'm gonna go find Kairi." There are warnings, people wanting to go with him. He refuses, heads off, and we get a wrap-up of all the characters. As of now, Kairi is still dead. After each character getting an individual or small group wrap-up epilogue thing, everyone is playing on Destiny Islands. Presumably, this is a reunion of some kind. Eventually, people look up and see Sora and Kairi sitting in a tree, holding hands. Oh, good, Sora saved her. Shame we didn't get to see or play any of it. As the camera zooms in and cuts between close-ups, a tear rolls down Kairi's face. Finally, as the camera pulls away, Sora fades. What? And then there's a photograph of them together. Excuse me, what? Then, after the credits scene, where Luxu, you know, the guy from Kingdom Hearts, Union Cross, that mobile game? No? Well, I wouldn't have either if I hadn't watched the 2+ hour movie in the final chapter prologue. Anyway, all the company masters and Luxu show up, and Luxu reveals himself to be Xigbar. Excuse me, what the f***? Cryptic lines are said, the box remains unopened, and end. Okay, then? We're left with more freaking questions than answers. What's going on? Is Luxu really Xigbar? Is Xehanort, who put half of himself into Xigbar, really just Luxu, so he isn't really gone? Who are these company leaders anyway? Why did Luxu call them back? What's the point of all this? What about the master who disappeared? What's in the box?
What's in the box?
What about Sora? Is he alive or isn't he? Who is the guy who asked Sora if he needed a hand? Was he the old master? If not, who is he? Was Austin from Game Theory right and the master was Xehanort from some time in between young and old? This is so frustrating to me because everything I have seen up to this point has been that this would be the last installment of the franchise. The previous installment was called Final Chapter Prologue. Does that mean it is the final chapter prologue? That doesn't make sense. What about Final Chapter Prologue? That makes less sense to me. The only thing that I could think of would be Final Chapter, Prologue, meaning that this was the prologue to the final chapter. Why then are we ending with cliffhangers? In fairness, I'm pretty sure I misinterpreted this. It could have been the final prologue to the third chapter, and there are no commas to tell us one way or the other. I probably should relearn Japanese to see if there's a translation error. Thing is, this is a really successful company with ties to Disney. You would think they would have access to good translators. Turns out there's supposedly more games in the works and apparently DLC, which I will get to at the end. I, however, find it annoying that they can't make a satisfying conclusion that at least solves a bunch of the mysteries and provide a good conclusion to Sora's story. So now we get to the part that I'm loath to talk about. One of the most frustrating things about video essays is that one needs to organize the essay in question. This is difficult with this topic because games are a medium in which everything is interconnected. Gameplay, art, story all weave together and influence each other to create the experience we know as a video game. So trying to separate characters from plot by itself is hard, but it's even worse coming from a game perspective because we have the extra dimension of the player controlling the actions of the character, even if it is limited. Sora as a character is the same as he always has been. Of course, I think this is a good thing. He's basically a puppy and I love it. He's carefree, yet also reliable. He's a good person, friendly, but has a strong sense of what is right and wrong and follows it. He hates that he is benched, but he goes along with it because he thinks that they are right. Sure, we know from hindsight that they're wrong, but he will do what he is told in order to have the mission succeed. He wants to help, but feels bad because he's told he can't. That, of course, doesn't stop him from having fun, though. For the most part, he is very positive. Remember that plot point I mentioned earlier? Well, here's where I'm going to talk about it. Just before he dies, after everyone but Riku around him is carried off into darkness, he cries out in anguish saying, "My friends are my power, and they are all gone. I am nothing without them." This is so interesting and could have been a great character development. There's just one minor problem. We've had little to no hint that this was coming. It was really out of left field. You would think something like this would have a much larger build-up, especially since they even hinted at it in Kingdom Hearts 1, when he lost his Keyblade at Hollow Bastion. In Kingdom Hearts 3, the closest we got was in the beginning, when Pete said that Sora looked weak, and should take him out while he had the chance. Sora looked down all sad-like, but that's easily chalked up to him just losing the powers, and not that he needed his friends around him. Oh, yeah, Maleficent and Pete are in this game. They're looking for a black box, which we're supposed to infer is the black box that Lucio had. They show up 2 or 3 times and accomplish nothing. We don't even fight them. Another plot point completely missed. Donald is still the obnoxious duck. Goofy is still an idiot savant. Riku is still the cool, all but Mary Sue friend. Mickey is still Mickey, and Kairi is still a plot device. That is a little unfair. They kind of tried to make her more than just a catalyst for other characters to feel things. She has a Keyblade now. She can fight. Problem is, most of the main scenes involving her as a prominent figure revolve around others feeling things because she is there. Sora's in love with her. Axel remembers Shion, kinda, because of her and starts crying. Aqua remembers blessing her in Birth by Sleep. She is Sora's guiding light out of mostly death. Oh yeah, and she gets killed! Point is, she still has some more active agency in Kingdom Hearts 2. Heck, maybe even Kingdom Hearts 1, and she was asleep for 3/4 of it. At least in those cases, she had the excuse of being a schoolgirl who wanted to do adventure things, but was kind of stuck because she couldn't fight. This just feels unfinished. We see nothing of her training with Merlin, see no progress. The girl deserves more screen time. Give it to her, you insufferable cephalopods! To change tone slightly, the world character interactions were actually really well done. I loved how the different characters reacted differently to our trio of half-pints, a nickname I don't actually remember them getting, but whatever, it's fine. Sora dancing with Rapunzel in the Tangled world was really fun, and having to slowly win over Buzz Lightyear made sense. I loved the Big Hero 6 world and that whole arc. The stories in individual worlds were the usual blend of either matching the movie and inserting Sora, or taking the characters and running with an entirely new plot. Either way, it worked sometimes, though obviously I preferred some versions to others, and there was no meaningful lasting reason to go to said worlds, because of that stupid trope I mentioned earlier. I bring up the worlds again because there is another important point I should make. Not spending time in Radiant Garden also means we don't see a chunk of the cast who was in both Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. Yep, I'm talking about Final Fantasy characters. No Leon, no Aerith, no Sid, no Yuffie. No Final Fantasy anybody. And Merlin has become the token Winnie the Pooh guy. Literally, that is the only reason he exists now, is to say, Sora, fix this book again. Or, here, random strangers I don't know, read the storybook. Sora doesn't even ask where they are or how Leon, Aerith, and Yuffie are doing. It's like he completely forgot they exist, either him or the development team. Axel, as a character, has some really good and consistent development. I just wish we got to see him fight more. Kyrie too, for that matter. Even the villains had hints of interesting character development. There were potential for betrayal, regret in some cases, even a few turning to the light to atone. Ansem showed up, because when his digitization machine blew up, he didn't die. He just got sent to the Shadow Realm, or World of Darkness. Why the devs can't let a sacrifice be a sacrifice, I just don't know. I just have the old man be dead already. He can live on through his data that he keeps leaving everywhere. In my opinion, if we met him, it should have been in the final world as a ghost clinging to his desire to atone for the damage he caused. Ansem needs to be dead. This might seem like I'm going after something small, but frankly, I think it's really important for two major reasons. First of all, he is known as Ansem the Wise. Whether or not he was actually wise is up for debate. However, regardless, the guy was really, really smart and would have been an extremely important asset to our protagonist. Him being alive, but unused, is a mistake. He has been built up since Kingdom Hearts 1. Why is he just sitting on his hands? The other reason Ansem being alive is a problem comes down to it completely negating the stakes of the story thus far. By him being alive, it functionally says that there have been no consequences from the first few games. Obviously, this isn't the only example of this. Xion was supposed to be forgotten when she returned her memories to Sora by proxy through Roxas. I suspect the reason he can dual-wield Keyblades is because she did have some existence to her and passed it to him. In Dream Drop Distance, we confirmed that nobodies eventually would gain hearts, a convenient out to how Xion could come back. This concept was something that they could have done more with, but were stuck with an unexplained return to humanity. Ansem's research into darkness, regardless of which Ansem it is, serves as no real warning in the future generations because it gets fixed so easily. In fact, the universe Mary sues itself into giving itself everything it needs to make sure that the ending is good for everyone. Why is this a thing? For those of you wondering, I'm using Literature Devil's description of what a Mary Sue is. You can check that video out after this one. Terra also existed for a brief time. He gets saved and is able to fight his way out of Xehanort's clutches, and was the weird Heartless helping Xehanort's Heartless? This thing was Terra the whole time? Don't get me wrong, I think it's a cool idea, and there's a great deal of implications. I just wish there was more to it. Like, does he remember fighting Sora at the end of Kingdom Hearts 1? What does this have to say about Riku when he was possessed? Speaking of Riku, we also got to deal with his dark ghost that keeps helping him. Yeah, that's a thing. What's up with that? Is it real? I assume so, because it takes the replica of evil Dark Riku so that Naminé can have a body. But if so, how come no one else can see him? And in a similar vein, why is it that characters only exist in cutscenes if they have a purpose? No, I don't mean them being off camera. I mean they literally cease to exist unless they have a line. No one reacts to events going on unless they have a line. The exception to this is Phil. You know, Phil from Hercules. But he shows up for one scene, says and does nothing, not even an effort noise, and it never appears again. Come on, people, seriously? What does Mickey say when Sora talks to Marluxia and Larxene? What does Sora say when Riku talks to the ghost of himself that a Sora apparently can't see? And then have a replica float up and poof out of existence? And then we have Xehanort. Where do I even begin? Having an antagonist turn from his ways is an interesting idea. Even having him do it on his deathbed could have worked. Having him do it the way it was done just felt wrong. It didn't make sense. It makes me wonder why we spent so much time building this guy up as evil. Remember that thing I mentioned about how everything is interconnected? Well, here's where it really plays in. He's consistently, in Kingdom Hearts 1 and Birth by Sleep, talked about how darkness was a power that could be controlled. He talked about the balance of light and dark. And sure, some of that was lies to get Terra to do exactly what he wanted. But obviously he found dark power to be useful, even necessary. So when the big reveal is that he wanted to use the Keyblade to unleash darkness on the worlds, to wipe them out and have light rebuild a perfect world, it just sounded wrong. Especially when he yields the Keyblade over to Sora. Then he and Ghost Ericus turn into light and presumably poof off into death or something. Now, to get back to the previous question, why are we believing him? It's entirely plausible he was giving up that body because he knew he lost this round. But Sigbar is still alive and he could still execute a plan. Maybe we shouldn't believe the 4D chess playing compulsive liar? But no, that would ruin the parallelism of the chess game that he and Ericus play in flashbacks. Honestly, this turn feels out of place. They go out of way to make the guy satanic, tricking Tara with carefully crafted words, flat out murdering a defenseless girl. Yes, I'm still salty about that. In a sacrificial manner. Even his final boss form has a goat head, which in many Judeo-Christian circles is a satanic symbol. His organization has 13 members, an unlucky number, while there are 7 Guardians of Light, a number that is considered lucky, but historically in the West has been a number of completion, stemming from the Jewish idea of there being 7 days of creation. All of these subtle signs point to this guy being evil, the big bad. And that isn't even getting into the complex symbolism that is in every Kingdom Hearts game, at least up until this one. Him doing a complete 180 after a brief conversation seems incredibly disingenuous. And why isn't Sora beating the snot out of him, telling him to bring Kairi back? Why are we just ignoring this? So if it wasn't clear, I have some strong feelings about this. But is it characters where the problem lies? Plot, writing, gameplay? Well, let's actually talk about that. If I had to guess what happened, I think the developers went into this without sufficient planning. Now, to qualify, I have not myself worked on a game of this level, with a full studio working at it, and the combined efforts of many people. With this said, my understanding is that games are like films and how production is scheduled carefully. Each department has to communicate with one another so there isn't an issue with how the entire product combines. As someone who is working on a similar project of such a small scale as to barely be comparable, I'm discovering that this is necessary for myself. So I can see how things can easily get gummed up. I don't know if there was poor communication or what happened, but honestly, I think it was way too rushed. Too many things seem like they were thrown in without proper thought or foreshadowing, and some things really needed to be resolved. We had waited for so long for this installment, many of us just wanted a clean ending. I hear that future installments wouldn't have Sora, Donald, and Goofy. What all this who want the story crave is an ending then. Not cliffhangers with vague hints of potential futures and revelations, which you have been hitting at for a while. Connecting Birth by Sleep with Union Cross via the Keyblade Graveyard caused Union Cross to be canon and directly connected to the story. So why are Lucio and the Union leaders not given at least some semblance of an explanation? Characters act like themselves, but they feel like they're missing a large chunk of development in the middle. In a rush to make people feel nostalgia, they bring back characters who frankly should have stayed dead. Don't get me wrong, I think Roxas and the organization members were great choices, and seeing Xion again hit every heartstring perfectly. I could see a very strong argument against Xion, but I appreciate it, and it wasn't completely out of left field. Having the rest of the organization members be alive was a reasonable decision, but I don't think every one of them should have come back. Yenzo, Marluxia, basically everyone who died at Castle Oblivion shouldn't have returned. Or if you absolutely must have them back, at least don't have them wake up the same time as the guys who died at least a whole year later. Now, I was happy with how there were mysterious things that weren't explained in the first game, like the opening, secret bosses, the history of Ansem, and other stuff. I even was cool with the second game as well. Now, however, it's getting a bit ridiculous. The ending was a mess. Naminé never actually shows up, despite Sora actively looking for a way to get her and Roxas a body until the end, when we see her wake up in the ending cutscene. Also, the ambiguous ending isn't satisfying. Is Sora alive or not? What's going on? It just comes down to this whole thing being unfinished, which is the only reason I could think of why it is the way it is. What is there has some nice polish, but polishing an unfinished story leaves us unsatisfied. They missed out on a bunch of things that we would have liked to see, while bringing back things that frankly we didn't care about, or were at worst actively detrimental to the whole overall feel and value of events, both in previous games and the game it's in. I don't know if it was poor management, low budget, mismanaged budget, too many producers who all want different things, or what broke down along the way, but really, the game we are left with is not terribly satisfying. Additionally, they added mechanics that literally no one asked for. Why are there Game & Watch style minigames on an in-game smartphone? Why am I playing a game in a game? Why are the loading screens the main character's freaking Twitter accounts? Why would you waste time with this crap that doesn't add to the narrative? Why are we now having to worry about food buffs? Why is this Monster Hunter mechanic in here? Why are attraction commands even a thing? I'm pretty sure I know why. It's because some higher ups at a certain corporation wanted things that were at odds with the dev team's vision. I will continue to play it, having found the challenges and side things to do. Despite all my gripes, the gameplay is still enjoyable. However, as a game that shares the name with the powerhouses that were Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and Birth by Sleep, it falls flat and falls really hard. Now, I hear that there's DLC coming, and the DLC solves some of these problems. They teased Leon and Yuffie. They also teased Sora going to the final world again to find Kairi. The problem is, this is DLC that we will have to pay for, meaning that we're going to have to pay to finish the game that we already bought. This is unacceptable. The DLC problem in games must be dealt with. One reviewer I read said that Kingdom Hearts 3 was too little too late. Honestly, for those of us who loved the series, too late was never a factor. The too little, however, that hurt too much.